This is the News Chain podcast, and today we are counting down the top 7 most inspirational questions from our recent episode. We recently met a couple of founders who were in YC during the COVID batch. So these guys they missed out on a lot of travel, and I guess we would agree that it makes a lot of difference if you're in like within the environment there in Francisco compared to back at home. So you were there. You're a part of YC in 2014, right? And how did that go for you?
It was an interesting time for us because when we went into YC, we went in with a different idea than what we are now. So pre YC was more similar to what we're doing now. So we sort of pivoted and then pivoted back. It's a weird time for our company. So we went in with our iPad app called Game Press at that time, which was an app that empowers people to make mobile games and share them with friends and family across the world. The vision was to democratize game development and make it fun and enjoyable. Um, but getting into YC, we actually applied before, didn't get in, and then we kept in touch with Michael Siebel, who is now one of the leading people at YC. So, with some of his feedback and advice, we sort of shifted focus a little bit and going more on interactive books. So this is things like children's books, that sort of stuff. Um, and so we sort of modified our tool GamePress to make it more focused on creating interactive books on iPad um, and targeting authors, illustrators, that sort of stuff. Um, what we found was people when we spoke to publishers and things, a lot of times they'd come back to us and say, "Oh yeah, this is really cool. If only it could make games." And we're like, "Oh, we just shifted away from games." So then, the more we spoke to people and potential customers, the more we found games was sort of the way to go, and it's something that we were more passionate about as well. If I'm being honest, during the whole transition to going with books, we sort of lost that passion a little bit. So then towards the end of YC, or I think it was post YC, we sort of shifted back and went more so into the gaming space. We met with Paul Graham during that time as well, and our company name was really terrible at that time. We rebranded to Tappable. He's like, yeah, this name is dumb. I don't remember his exact words, but it was basically like, this is a terrible name. It's like, you guys should. And then he made the connection of being like, our tool is sort of like HyperCard from like the 80s and the original Macs and stuff. He's like, it would be cool if you had like had that connection to like HyperCard or something. I'm like, yeah. And then we went home and looked up the domain for HyperPad to connect, the HyperCard aspect and iPads, and it wasn't available, but it was really cheap. So we were able to make an offer, and we got it like really, really cheap. And then that's when HyperPad was born, and we pivoted to focusing more on the gaming side, and allowing people to make that decision of whether they want to make games or books and things like that. And then that sort of trickled us down to like an educational path as well, which is something we found, which was really interesting. We didn't make our tool for the educational side at all, but we found that a lot of teachers were using it to teach kids programming and introducing them to STEM skills and engineering and math and all that sort of stuff. So we're still trying to figure that space out, but it's something we're moving more towards right now.
I noticed you told me that you applied a couple of times in YC before getting selected. So what was that time like, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what were your initial vision and challenges?
Yeah, so we actually applied twice. So in 2012, we applied, and we did get selected for an interview. But at that same time, we also got accepted to Dream Adventures, which is a accelerator program in New York City. So I think we're one of the few YC companies who've actually taken part in two different accelerators. So we have a unique perspective in that regards. And so we got accepted in Dream It, but when we had like I think around that same week we got an email back saying, hey, from YC, saying, hey, we want to interview you guys. And at that point we're like, we asked them if we can move up the interview because we have this offer from Dream It. We didn't hear back from them in time. Ultimately we decided to just accept the Dream It, since that offer was on the table and we didn't want to give up that funding. um, which was a great experience, very different than YC. And then the following year, after Dream It, we left New York City, went back to our town in Canada. It's a small town, so things really start to slow down. And we we said, well, let's try to pick things up again and go through that accelerator mindset. And that's when the idea of applying to Y Combinator came in, especially for more funding and things as well. So we applied to YC. I think it was end of or like the spring batch of 2013. That's when we went through the interview process. We made it. They flew us out to Silicon Valley. We did the interview there. Ultimately, we didn't get selected. I think one of the reasons was we were pushing back a lot. So um, during the interview, they kept sort of like poking on like our business model and what we were trying to do. And we were very stubborn in that sense of no, we don't think that's going to, we're very stubborn against their advice and feedback. And I think that's ultimately what led to the rejection. Um, and then talking with Michael Siebel afterwards and staying in contact with him, he sort of led to that as well as like, yeah, we were trying to, push you guys a certain way to think about other things. And then when we applied again, we took their feedback a little bit more.
Will you say this helped you in your second phase of the product when hyperpad came around after YC?
Yeah. So by that point, we figured out kids are actually pretty good. So, for example, one of our current interns was one of those early kids on hyperpad. So he started using, or sorry, GamePress. So he started using GamePress, I think, when he was like 8 or 9 years old or something like that. Um, and he was making fun little silly things as little kids do, just playing around, creating cool stuff. But he stuck with the platform. And as we rebranded, he sort of came along the way. Now it's been like 10 years later. He's going to University for Computer Science. And he's making some really, really advanced stuff. So he's learning programming and all like the traditional programming languages, and then taking what he's learning in university and applying it inside of HyperPad and creating projects with great graphics and great, really advanced stuff like from online multiplayer and server logic, and it's go take it to the next level. He's doing stuff we didn't know was possible. Um, so what we did was basically said, hey, nobody knows hyperpad better than you. Why don't you come on board? Since you're still in school, we'll bring you on as an intern, and we pay him as an intern. He works part-time, so we work around his school schedule, and he's making some of the best hyperpad features. So um, really, so yeah, to answer your question, what we learned how to communicate with our users and really appreciate these kids, because these kids are not always going to be those little kids just playing around. They're going to be these pillars in our community, which sort of gives us our long-term strategy as well. So we want to create more of these guys. So the goal is get them when they're young, using the platform, playing around with it, but keeping them hooked, and then they're going to use this throughout their educational career. So I like to compare it similar to what Microsoft does with Office. When you're in school, early on, you're using Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all that sort of stuff. Um, Later on in your career, you're still using Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You're using it through every stage of education, and then in your job, you're still using those. So I think that's sort of the approach we want to go with HyperPad is start them when they're young, but let the app and the platform build with them.
How would you describe your current position in DevTools category? Given that you have a high ranking among iPad apps, and I was just going through a stream. You're quite popular on Reddit as well because of the environment you have established yourself within.
Yeah, I think as a tool, we're in a unique position where we we can be used by professionals and people who lack any technical skills at all. So we're in that nice in between spot where we're powerful enough where you can actually create things and sell them, like Hakan does, for example, or we're simple enough where you can use us in education and kids can use us to like learn on. So we're in that unique position um, where compared to other platforms, where we sort of don't force anything on anyone. So, like I know one of the feedback we received from some teachers was how they love our platform compared to competitors, is because the kids can use our platform, but they're not. There's no ceiling. So on the other platforms, it's once they go through all the documentation or the basics or tool set, that's it. Like they can't expand further. Whereas with us, they can actually continue using this and um, the ceiling is infinite. So we really like unleashed our creativity, and we're the tool set for that, I think.
I'm kind of interested in hearing about your strategies for enhancing further customer engagement, like maybe your presence on social media and even your efforts, like marketing efforts that contribute to the ongoing improvement and development.
Yeah, I think one of the big things we want to do is really showcase what the users are creating. So we're currently in the process of creating a new, what we call the hyperPad hub, which is a community where users can share their games, play them, leave feedback, all that sort of stuff. You can think of it as YouTube, but for games. And we're working on a new version of this, which focuses a lot more um, on making it easier to share, easier to play, easier to give feedback, and all that sort of stuff. So we're growing this community. So our big strategy is you know focusing on that. So we can build events within that platform, do partnerships with that platform, um, and that's sort of our leading point. And as well as then there's other things like focusing on SEO, doing blogs, case studies on user created projects, their journeys. For example, Hamish, who was the young kid in Australia who met President Obama, telling his story. Or the Hakan or Robinson, who's now our intern. So telling these stories of these amazing users on our platform. So I think that's a big thing as well.
So, while growing up as well, did you grow as did you have that age dynamic into play?
We were relatively close. I mean, we grew up together, so we have two other siblings as well who are older than us. So they were their own sort of group, and then them two were hanging out. So we were left to like play games or whatever it was ourselves. So we grew up together, very close. So we played games together, and that's sort of our passion grew at the same time. So we both sort of simultaneously, um, knew gaming. The gaming space was where we wanted to get started.
And what has that been like so far? Like, how have you managed to keep the personal and professional separate?
Um, Well, I mean, so there's been a few signs like keeping a professionalism separate in our personal lives hasn't been an issue. We get along great regardless, so that hasn't been a problem. I think it actually helped us get into YC as well. There was a moment during our YC interview where a similar question popped up on like how we communicate and how well we work together. And I think one of us started answering the question, and the other one finished it without even It's like we have this like mind melding moment where during the interview they're like, oh, this is like magic where these two are in sync in that way. So I think that helped us there. One thing we got some feedback early on from an investor in New York was they don't invest in siblings because if there's ever a situation where it arises that impacts the company or the siblings will always choose themselves over the company, which I can see their point, but at the same time, especially in our sense, we have our vision so aligned where uh, we know what we want for the company to succeed, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get there, and we have that commitment. Um, so I can sort of see, but at the same time, I think we've proven that to be wrong because the company, we both have the same vision for the company.
What's next within this vision for the two of you?
Um, Well, I mean, for as far as the company's concerned, we want to get hyperpad to cross, to bring in millions of dollars, so we can grow it across cross platforms. We want it to make we want it to we want to bring back what Game Press was as far as the community side, and how many active users, and how how alive it felt, but bring that back in with actual creative people. So making the bringing that creativity to life. So I think that's sort of the goal for the next the next few years is you know bring millions of people to create more.
If you want to watch or listen to the full episode, you can find us on all audio and video platforms out there. We release new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday. So subscribe and follow us for more updates and other fun releases.